Hi guys, today I wanted to give you my raw, unfiltered reaction and honest impressions of Ananta, which formerly was known as Project Mugen. I've seen things in the past regarding Project Mugen, whatever you'd like to call it, which kind of made it remind me of something like an anime Genshin Spider-Man. And I know people don't necessarily love comparing everything to Genshin or everything to Genshin, but an anime gacha is kind of the category and it's what it's most similar to. But with that, they have the announcement trailer that I'm going to be watching right now, giving my initial thoughts and again my impressions, but also giving you my thoughts about, well, this game alongside some other really important concerns and thoughts I have about the gaming gacha scene as a whole. I apologize again because this is likely not a video that you've expected someone like me to post, as I normally just post things like guides, but it has to be said that with so many games coming out, including games like Girls Frontline 2, Azur Promilia, Neverness to Everness, there are some thoughts and concerns I want to get out there. Without further ado, let's take a look at Ananta finally been announced. Now, before we start things off, unfortunately, if I actually watch this, I'll get copyrighted because of a song that's included in this. But even as you're looking through the environment, the different, well, kind of small details that they add into the game, including music, things like drag racing, things that honestly make you feel a bit more immersed. I'm honestly a really big fan of what has already been shown. There's the very immersive city life. There's the different activities, kind of exploration that go hand in hand with city life, but then there's also just the feeling that you're playing with or alongside other characters in the game. But a lot of what you're seeing on screen right now is honestly what made me fall in love with games like Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero, and even games like Genshin, which is there's a lot of goofy aspects to a world that is supposed to be fantastical. It's not supposed to make sense. To be clear, this is really cool for a number of reasons, not just because of the fact that, well, there's moving and other characters that are actually moving around at the same time, but also because they're pretty goofy and different than your average NPCs. We've got things like, again, as you saw it like a moment before, we've got basketball matches, we've got people taking random selfies, we've even got things like, you know, climbing monkey things with alongside, you know, toilets that are being sat on by other people. We've got mysterious plot lines that we're not super familiar with quite yet, but we've got even Transformer cars, which also looks pretty ridiculous. To be honest, I'm a big fan of everything so far. As we continue through the story and continue through the trailer, there are a lot of things to be also interested in, including the dynamic of, well, maybe the characters, including, well, the combat, and also some of the more exciting details like, well, whatever the heck that was, where the main character got into his vehicle and he slammed the door shut. Now, whether this means that you can use things like the special grapple is supposed to be used for environmental adjustment or for environmental manipulation, whether or not you're able to use that alongside things like the car is still kind of up for debate. And honestly, I'm excited if it was something that gets added. But from what I can tell right now, one of my biggest praises and one of the things I enjoy the most about Ananta is simply just the fact that it looks like a fully immersed game. There are plenty of other things that honestly really surprise me and kind of pique my interest, including their ability to take things very unseriously. Again, you've got, you know, meme glasses, you've got Spider-Man mechanics, you've got characters that honestly look like they belong in some sort of cartoon, alongside some of the most goofy looking bosses that I've ever seen. Like, what was that? Like a guy with like 8 hands coming out of his head? Like, what in the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is this? Let's just break down a couple of the things that we just saw here, right? Ananta does not look or appear to be just your average gacha game. This is a game that, for all intents and purposes, is a lifestyle, immersive-esque action combat game. I get it. Everything is nowadays kind of action combat-y, open world pilled, but honestly, Ananta does make it seem like you're unironically immersed into the life. Like, you've got work, I guess, as you saw at the very end there, where we're squished between 2 people on the train. We've got things like borrowing cars. We've got things like manipulating the environment around us, going to work maybe? I don't know exactly what this is. This reminded me a decent amount of Kaching, but whatever. It's really sincerely incredible how good this game looks without us knowing too much about it. Now, let me make one thing absolutely clear. What we know about Ananta is very little or not. We don't know that much about Ananta. And in that sense, I do understand some concerns about whether the game will be good. And of course, we're waiting for Ananta to come out in whatever time that they announce it. But with games like Neverness to Everness having their recent closed beta and things like Girls Frontline coming out as of like a couple days ago, the game is actually quite interesting. We've seen with other games in the past that competition kind of exists in a very real sense between companies, and when one game starts announcing their new trailers or their new content or their new betas, usually means that other competitors in the space feel incentivized to try and compete and also grab that similar market share. I'm no financial expert and I'm no market analyst or advertiser, but look no further for an example of that than, well, with all of basically the competition between a game like Zenless and Wuthering Waves. You could call me crazy and have I have a tinfoil hat on, but the honest truth is that things like the amount of primo gems you get for winning a reward, when they time certain live streams like Zenless and Wua prior to the release, were timing their release dates and their game releases around their live streams and special live streams so that they don't come out at around the same time. In terms of compensation, when things go wrong, like they have to compete with each other in terms of how much or how generous you are towards one another. And honestly, I think for the average person, you could obviously see the clear competition brewing between two companies that otherwise didn't have any direct official beef with each other. And I have a feeling that this will actually be something that happens with Ananta and Neverness to Everness. Now, to be clear, other creators, including I Win and Lose Gaming, have also commented about and talked about Neverness to Everness and how good it looks. But being, not editing, no nothing, in terms of what you actually get or how the games look, we saw what Ananta just looked like. Look at the striking comparison that a game like Neverness to Everness has. Now, again, you've got all the different, you've got the cityscape, and yeah, there's maybe not as much web slinging, and it doesn't appear to be as vivid or bright in some cases, or like daytimey, but this downtown, cyberscapey kind of Tokyo-esque city has a lot of similar features that we just saw from, well, Ananta. They've got the driving, and for whatever reason, 2025 is the year of everyone's got to drive cars. But with that, you've got a number of, exploration activities or open world activities that a lot of gamers, I guess, nowadays have been, more attracted to or appealed to. Specifically with a game like Wuthering Waves and Genshin as of late, these are two major things that a lot of people are enjoying from those fandoms, and why not obviously introduce that into their own game too? However, what all this means is that these two companies are kind of, slated to eventually compete with each other, or they're on a collision course to eventually compete with each other in terms of fan base and in terms of, well, rewards and market share. And honestly, regardless of, again, what that what the outcome of that specifically is, I'm a pretty big fan of all the games that are coming out. Now, I will say before anything else, I'm certainly going to give both games a try. I don't think these are games that really need to be in isolation from one another, and I don't think that if you are someone that loves Neverness to Everness, you can't play a game like Project Mugen or Ananta. And honestly, the style of the game is something that it appears as though if you want to play casually, you could do so, but if you also want to spend every living hour decorating your house, seamlessly transitioning between combat and playing casual sort of encounters or fights, that's the sort of vibe that I get from both of these games. Now, let me be clear as well, there aren't nearly enough details quite to say what the gameplay loop or what the everyday gameplay aspects of both games are going to be, but I am genuinely impressed with, well, just these two games alone. But another force or another kind of game that, if you guys aren't aware of, is also going to be present with Ananta, Project Mugen, and Neverness to Everness is, well, Azur Promilia. Now, we don't know anything about when Azur Promilia is going to be released, but this is the game that was announced or kind of teased during the height of Palworld, and it kind of took the world by storm. Everyone loved the idea of, well, yet another Pokemon or monster catcher that was somehow tied into and combined with Genshin. Just being fully transparent, a game that has Pokemon and Genshin elements at the same time is nothing less than peak, I think, in terms of interest, especially for the average gamer. You get to capture, tame, train, whatever you want to call it, but interact with a creature or a monster alongside, well, being an anime husbando or waifu. And that's by all means totally fine. I think that there's a lot of value in playing games like this, but the combat system, the open world aspects all look amazing for, well, the same reason that I'm sure all these other games have appealed to players as well. Open world is kind of in right now. However, I do want to say we've seen past games with open world aspects not do very well. We've seen games like Tower of Fantasy not necessarily crash and die, but compared to what it was initially slated to be, which was this Genshin killer, it's obviously not that. However, Azur Promilia, I think, serves itself to be one of the most interesting games that hasn't quite shown any closed beta or information. And even on their Twitter account right now, if you take a look at it in their description, it's like a complete blank screen with nothing on it. But moving back to what I consider to be the most interesting game that I guess has just been recently announced, or that I'm assuming we'll hear more news about, I guess. Ananta is honestly one of the coolest games that I've seen. Again, it's really hard not to compare Ananta to the other games that are being released, including all the other anime action combat games that are being teased and showcased in 2024 and 2025. But as the year rounds down, guys, I do want to say that personally, I'm going to be trying Ananta. If you haven't seen it already, there are plenty of reactions and content and little teasers and tidbits of story that they've announced. Whenever it comes out, I'm going to be trying it out, and hopefully I get into a closed beta or a beta of some sort, because I'm really interested in it. To be honest, as with all videos and all things regarding this, I'm not sponsored. I would love to kind of end this by saying, and use my code in the description or something to kind of end things, and you go, oh, like he was sponsored, that makes sense. But no, honestly, just being completely, straightforward with you guys, no sponsor from any of these games, specifically when I'm talking about my honest thoughts about the game, and I'm really interested. I don't know when any of these games are going to be announced. From what I can tell, they're already ramping up with closed betas. So the second that one game starts to build up traction, or the second that one game starts to get a bit more friction and people want to find out when the game releases and they start asking about releases, that'll probably kind of light a fire under the other companies to start announcing their own betas, and then all of this will eventually culminate in a release. But that will probably be a game that I might check out either on this channel or one of the others. And that's the final thing I want to talk about for today, which is the fact that I've kind of come to the realization that when I make content for, well, whatever game I'm creating or playing on the side, it feels like maybe it would be better or more ideal for me to split the content between different channels. And with that, I've created two different channels currently, one for Stranova, which I don't know, I was kind of just interested in Stranova. I'm so bad at first-person shooters, if you couldn't tell. But for that, I made its own channel, and I also made a channel for, or specifically regarding, Girls Frontline 2. Girls Frontline 2, I think I'm actually enjoying a lot, and I would say it's primarily because of, well, all the dormitory content. But being truthful, a lot of people I know around me are playing the game very casually. Players that I haven't seen touch a gacha game in years are kind of enthralled either by the dormitory content, as I mentioned, or the fact that it feels a bit similar to something like XCOM. In any case, I'm going to leave two links also in the description regarding Girls Frontline 2 and all the other channels. I don't know how many channels I'm going to release, but I'll probably be making posts or community posts when or if I make channels dedicated specifically to these other games. Whether or not Ananta and honestly something like Neverness to Everness or Azur Promilia end up on another channel, I'm not quite sure. But with that, I am going to, well, I'll let you know. In any case though, guys, Ananta looks really cool. The 2 minutes that we've seen is pretty interesting. I'm not sure about the whole name change. Don't understand what the idea behind that was or why they changed it. But for what it's worth, I think it's an interesting game. I'm going to check it out when it comes out. That's going to be it for this video. Make sure to check out the rest of my socials, the channels that I mentioned, and make sure to like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, everyone. I'll see you all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.